Hello, everyone, and welcome to another brand new edition of our Culture Read 2020 podcast. Those of you who've been able to tune in on Facebook or on YouTube or on the Culture Fest webpage, over the past few months, we've been talking with various guests from our community who are taking part in the book study that's taking place. If you're watching this and this is your first episode, you haven't caught up on the other conversations, let me explain briefly what's going on. In place of our in-person Culture Fest event this year, we have taken advantage of the unique circumstances of 2020 to do some book studies. Our Culture Reads committee has put together a list of 3 book titles on the topic of anti-racism, and we have given people the opportunity to read those books and have discussions in their community. And so we're going to talk with one of our guests today who has been taking part in that initiative. We have with us Reverend Adam Banks. Hello, Adam. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Welcome aboard. So good to talk with you again. Could you remind our listeners, I know Adam and I have talked a few times on this podcast, what book did you select as part of your study for the Culture Reads 2020 project?
Yes, I'm reading the book How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, along with my congregation, First Baptist Church.
Marvelous. Thanks for sharing that. How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. At this point, I know the first few times we talked, you were in the process of reading through the book. At this point here in mid-December, you're probably either finished with the book or close to finishing with the book. So before I jump into the specific questions on our script here, at this stage in the book, are there any things that are standing out to you as main ideas or lessons here in the tail end of the book? Anything that jumps out at you in terms of lessons learned so far?
Yes. There are several things that have spoken to me directly, and I think that are just very beneficial for I think all people. Considering that which he shares, one thing is that we can all, everyone, like no matter our background, no matter our ethnicity or race, that we can all either be racist or anti-racist, and we can change in where we might be with respect to that assessment. That is one very large piece of it. But then also, as he stated very early on and maintained throughout the entire book, is that racism versus anti-racism is rooted in the policies that we support, and therefore the ideas that overflow from those policies. And so policy is what is harped on, what is emphasized in this book, and what has the largest impact in the lives of those impacted or affected by their influence. And so for minorities, for marginalized communities, he is speaking directly for Black people. It is the policies that we support that ultimately reveal where we are with that assessment of being racist or anti-racist.
Mm-hmm. That's helpful to me. I've actually recorded a few podcast conversations this morning, and we've spent a lot of time talking with some other guests about the personal application of being an anti-racist, ways that we can check our assumptions, ways that we can broaden our perspectives. What's helpful about what you're describing is really tackling some of the systemic issues by looking at a larger, beyond just me as a person. What are the policies and the structural sort of things that changes that I might get behind? So that's a helpful insight, I think. I've got here on my script here, we put together a couple of questions in advance just to guide our conversation. And so I've got a few thoughts related to the book, and these come kind of specifically from the tail end of the book. Actually, before I ask, could we remind the audience here, just because I think it's helpful sometimes to hear different examples of how this is playing out in different places. For example, we listened to another guest who mentioned that they were listening to the audiobook. We listened to someone who was talking with colleagues and coworkers. You mentioned that your congregation is together reading this. Would you mind just sharing what that looks like in practice when it comes to a congregational book study? How are you going about that? What are the mechanics of that, if you don't mind? Just so people have an example of what it might look like.
Absolutely. As a congregation, we were made aware of this culture read being led by our city, and so we felt as though we discerned that it would be faithful for us to participate in just being able to remain aware and be partners that express a commitment to justice, and those things, some of those very important things that lie at the center of the faith, of our faith. And so we decided, kind of in our adult Sunday school class, there was like a vote between the different books proposed by the city, and How to Be an Anti-Racist was the book that we selected. And so every Sunday, one of our lay leaders was really helpful in organizing reflection questions and helping us to actively engage in discussion each Sunday. And we had several leaders who were able to moderate that discussion, and we, let me tell you, we had some very lively discussion and good engagement and reflection on that which is shared in the book.
Marvelous. Well, I so appreciate you taking a moment. That might have felt like a little detour or tangent for some folks, but I appreciate hearing about the process, because if there's somebody listening in who's not quite sure, they haven't done a book study before or not sure how to go about it, having some examples about ways different people in the community have approached it, I think is helpful. So thanks for sharing that. Now I'll get to my script. I went a little off script there. Let me take a look at my question here. These are all from related to the book that Adam selected, that is How to Be an Anti-Racist. And so Kendi, the author here, has written, "White supremacist is code for anti-human, a nuclear ideology that poses an existential threat to human existence." That's quite a weighty quote there. But what stood out to me there is white supremacist is code for anti-human. This is a nuclear ideology that poses an existential threat to human existence. And so what I would like to ask, in following up to that weighty quote there, how are white supremacists and their ideology harmful to all of humanity? The notion here is that this is something that is detrimental or harmful to humanity on a large scale. How might that be the case? Would you mind kind of unpacking a little bit of that idea for us, if you don't mind?
Yeah. I'll share just kind of what he mentions in that section of the book he talks about. And let me first highlight with the question, we're talking about white supremacy. And so this idea of whiteness being just that supreme, higher than, more valuable than anything that is not white. And so with that mindset that can sometimes creep up on people in subtle ways, or some folks can just be very blatant with their belief in white supremacy. However, it affects all of humanity, not just those who aren't white. It affects white people. And he shares this, he elaborates on this in the discussion, highlighting different policies such as climate change. And so often he says that with white supremacists, climate change is something that is not believed in, that it's not policies to help curb the destructive tendencies and habits that we have adopted. Those are not supported often by white supremacists, but that ignores the fact that so many white people are negatively impacted by the climate change that we see. That is one example. Affirmative action is another example. This policy that is often critiqued by many as being just a handout for minorities, a handout for those who aren't white. But again, Ibram Kendi points out that white women are those who have benefited from affirmative action more so than one might expect for Black people to benefit from that. He talks about that. He talks about the Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare, and how many white people benefited from that. But then also some of the just other beliefs, maybe not so much having to do with policy, but other lines of thought associated with white supremacy, such as Nazism. And so supporting the beliefs of one like Adolf Hitler, but those beliefs impacted white people on a tremendous scale, just devastating the lives of many, leading to tremendous loss. As did the central thoughts, the central beliefs of the Confederacy, which he also mentions that led to lives lost on the part of white people, that reach beyond any other conflict, or if we were even to combine the numbers of all the other conflicts or wars. And so all of these are ideas, are ways that he highlights white supremacy being a nuclear destructive force against not black people alone, not other minorities alone, but white people as well. I think about Dave Chappelle shared in one of his specials that he was going to vote, and he could overhear conversations that kind of gave off an air of white supremacy, and folks going to support a particular candidate, believing that their white supremacist thoughts would be supported by this candidate. But Dave Chappelle shared that his insight was that these people who were sharing these thoughts, he assumed that they were of a lower tax bracket or had lower incomes. And he was saying that along the lines of what Ibram Kendi shares, is that this candidate was not about to support their ideas or support their thoughts or beliefs in a way that was beneficial to their economic stability, their financial stability, but more so they would support his own stability. Dave Chappelle, who is a black man, and so that flawed thinking. I don't mean to go on and on, but Vice President-elect Kamala Harris received a lot of backlash for her thoughts shared in an interview where she was asked about reparations, and she kind of I don't know, she may have pivoted around the question a little bit, but she shared that in certain proposals that not only would black people benefit, not only would those who have been historically disenfranchised, not only would they benefit from particular acts, but all people would benefit. And so again, this idea of reparations or something specifically to benefit those who have been marginalized, not only benefiting, minorities, but benefiting all people. And so not only black people, but white people would benefit from a particular act that she has in mind. And I think what she shared to a very large extent is in alignment with what Ibram Kendi shares. But she got a lot of flack for her response. And I think some might be justified, some might have been a little misinterpreted, but very interesting, because historically, I think that is what we're able to see as Ibram Kendi shares in this chapter. I'll stop there.
No, not at all. I appreciate your insights always there. There's an old adage, I think it is, that a rising tide raises all ships. This idea that I'm misapplying it a little bit here, but this idea that by sometimes we think that efforts and policies like you've described that seem to be more focused on or targeting a particular type of population, a particular people group, it feels like they are getting something that we are not. And so this idea that when we broaden our perspective, that by addressing the systematic inequalities around us, those are not only is it helpful for those people who might be benefiting from the policies, but there is an overall benefit by and large collectively for our society. I think that's helpful to remember. Of course, when we're doing studies like this, we don't want it to be all about us. We want to try to avoid, if we can, having a selfish motivation of just thinking about myself. But what I hear in your comments there is that I think it is helpful to recognize when issues, nothing happens in a vacuum. There's not something that affects my neighbor that doesn't also affect me. And so I appreciate all those insights you shared there. It's a very helpful perspective, I think.
Yeah.
Now, kind of along those lines, Dr. Kendi shares something at the end here. It seems like an optimistic message at the end of this book. Kendi believes that it's possible for us to defy the odds and help our society heal from the effects of racism. And so, How to Be an Anti-Racist as the title of the book, that kind of implies that the author believes it's possible for us to be an anti-racist society. And so I just want to ask, is that something that you have hope for? Is that something you think is possible? And if so, what sort of actions or steps might be helpful to help bring that about?
Yeah. So one thing he shares in that, I think in that section, that healing can be painful. There can be some pain associated with healing, and he knows this firsthand, having been diagnosed with cancer and working through some of those healing treatments that were indeed painful for him. But over the course of time, his health benefited from those treatments. I do, along with Ibram Kendi, I do believe that it is possible. I do believe that we can work toward a place of healing, but this process will continue to have pain associated with it. Earlier this summer, this summer, we're not in summer anymore, but this past summer, a few friends of mine reached out to me. A few of my white friends reached out after the deaths and murders of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. God rest their souls. They reached out, and I would say that this has been a summer of awakening for them to different injustices perpetuated against Black people. Just violence that is carried on for far too long. And in their awakening and in the conversations we had, they're asking for me to share, maybe tell stories, that as they were awakening, that was painful for me. Asking about these traumatic experiences that I have had and that my family members have had with law enforcement and with the criminal justice system, and having very gut-wrenching conversations at times, sharing with them or saying, look, I can't share that with you. There's been a lot of work done. There have been so many voices who have shared about these things that I'm just going to encourage you to consult because it's just too painful for me to go over with you right now. But in this, over the course of the summer and into the fall and now getting into winter here soon, these friends of mine, these colleagues of mine have remained committed to engaging in healing acts. In the book, Ibram Kendi really associates the process for healing of racial inequalities with his journey of healing with cancer. And so treating racism like a cancer that has been found in its early stages. And so focusing primarily on those places where the cancer is found now, and removing any of those threats, and remaining attentive over the course of time to those locations that have been compromised, and making sure that there is no rise in that carcinogen, in that cancer causing racism any longer in the future. And I think even more, if I go back to where we started, to what stands out to me in the book is the policies. And I think sometimes that can be like larger. We can think where we are right now in this political season, we're coming right off of a national election. And so, we got to wait another 4 years to be mindful of these policies. No, I think local elections are just as relevant, just as important, if not more important, in different aspects. But not even that, not even limiting ourselves to that. I think the organizations that we're connected with, the groups, the clubs, the associations, the different agencies, all of these different connections we have, looking at the policies, looking at the manuals, the constitutions, the bylaws, all of that, and assessing how do these policies affect the people that they have influence over, and are they supporting equality? Are they supporting equity? Are they supporting? Are the implications of these policies having an impact of justice or injustice? Really assessing that with all of the organizations. And I'm proud of the people that I'm connected with for asking those questions, and especially in some of the white only spaces that they might occupy, asking those questions, and getting uncomfortable with their peers and with their colleagues, with some of their superiors in the workplace, bosses and advisors and that type of thing, and moving toward practical, very, very pragmatic ways of healing of these things. And so the policies where we are, I think, is a way of moving toward this healing that I do believe. Look, all right, now I don't want to preach, but Hebrews 11:1, the faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not yet seen. And so for me, the faith is about what is to come, what we're pursuing, what is on the way. And without that faith, without that hope, then I think we fall into a spiral of apathy, and that's just not me. That's not where I am. And I think the circles that I'm connected with help to keep that flame of hope alive as we continue to move forward toward this space of healing that I absolutely believe in.
Mm-hmm. Adam, I find your words, as always, encouraging and compelling. Encouraging from the standpoint of a sense of hopefulness and optimism that it's possible to make meaningful change. Compelling in the sense that I can feel you urging us all collectively forward to continue taking steps to do what we can to improve ourselves, improve our communities, and to seek to bring about fairness and equity for our neighbors. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. I appreciate appreciate it. I always tell all the guests I talk to, I feel like I could talk to you all day, but if we had a 10-hour podcast, we might lose them. So I so appreciate your time. You've been very generous talking with me. Do you have any, I don't want to put you on the spot, I'm going off script here a little bit. Do you have any final encouraging word for somebody who might be interested in being a part of this book study but hasn't started yet? Any final kind of a thought you want to share before we wrap up our time together?
Yeah. Thank you for that. Jack, this is not off script, or if you do go off script, we're supposed to. So thank you for the way that you lead and moderate the conversation. Thank you. I think that there it is not too late. Get engaged, get involved, and then it's okay to disagree. Just because it's in a book, it doesn't mean we can't disagree with it. And just because I say to my congregation all the time, I'm the pastor, but I'm one voice. And so you can disagree with me. Like, it's okay. You're disagreeing with me might, and sometimes probably will help me to grow. And so even as we engage in dialogue and discussion, or just open our minds to different thoughts, we grow even if we sometimes don't agree. And so I just encourage folks, if they're considering it, go ahead, please do. And when you disagree, that's okay. We can do that. And sometimes our disagreements might help us understand why we think something, or it might cause us to ask, okay, now why I disagree, but why do I disagree? And we continue to grow. And so I just encourage, if you're thinking about it, if you're considering it, yes, do it.
Marvelous, very helpful words from Pastor Adam Banks. Thanks so much, Adam, for being with us. As we conclude our time here on this podcast episode, let me tell our listeners, as Adam has just encouraged you, it is not too late to become involved. There are a few different ways you can become involved in the CultureRead 2020 project. First of all, our generous sponsors have made some copies of the books available. Now, again, it's not just that these are the only 3 books you could learn from. There's a whole lot of books out there, lots of wonderful resources, but the Culture Reads Committee has selected 3 titles: White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad, and of course, the book that Adam was speaking about today, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. Copies of those books are available at the Clark County Public Library. We're talking about the main library location. These books have been provided by our sponsors specifically for this study, so you don't have to go through the general circulation process of borrowing, that's the word used for library. We don't rent books from the library. Borrowing from the library. You can go to the reference desk and reference these specific books. They can let you know what books are available. Friendly reminder, if you're listening in, that they are doing curbside service right now. So you'll want to call the library and ask specifically about the Culture Reads 2020 books that you could borrow or rent, if you want to use that word. Hey, one more thing you can do. You can go to springfieldohio.gov/culturefest. And that's springfieldohio.gov/culturefest. That's typically our Culture Fest webpage, but right now that page has been decked out with all kinds of information about this project. You can find links to our previous episodes of podcasts and hear from other guests, including previous conversations we've had with Pastor Adam Banks. You can also find information about the books and ways to stay involved with ongoing discussions that are taking place. Keep an eye on that page and the City of Springfield's Facebook page, because there are going to be some upcoming opportunities for discussion about these books. One last thing to tell you before I let you go. I would be remiss if I did not thank our generous sponsors who have made this Culture Reads 2020 project possible. I would like to thank the Springfield Foundation, the First Energy Foundation, Southfield Village Apartments, the Clark County Public Library, and also our fair city of Springfield, Ohio. Big thanks to our behind-the-scenes folks who have made this happen. I'm thinking of Nancy Flinchball, who has helped coordinate our interviews and put together some questions for us. Also, Shannon Meadows, who's played a role in planning this. And our technical guru, the wizard behind the scenes today, Valerie, who is making all the technical things happen. Big thanks to Valerie as well. That concludes this episode of Culture Reads 2020. We will end it there. Of course, stay safe out there. Wash your hands and wear your mask. We will see you next time. Take care.